Sometimes we wonder why people actually take a step toward us.
This is Auto Collabs.
Because Cirillo smells sometimes.
Intentionally. That's the problem. Intentionally. And I guess when you hear somebody else talk about the thing that made them take a step closer, it kind of reminds you of the fact that it's not just what I think we're doing. It's what we're actually doing. And today's guest is one of those reminders for me. Jimmy Douglas, founder and CEO of Plug. We can talk about it now because he announced it at ASOTU. And the first time we met with him, my first interaction with him was that he sent a LinkedIn DM. And at that point, it was just like he was the Tesla guy. And he was like, hey, I just wanted to reach out to the guy who said something about me on their show, to which case we scoured through our 700-page morning show prep document.
Oh, no, what did we
And I was like, I have to know before I answer this. But we said a nice thing, and he has been one of the favorite new introductions of the last 6 months is definitely today's guest.
I'm having a Marvel Cinematic Universe moment right now because the storyline just came full circle.
Oh, you didn't realize?
I didn't know he was the guy that months ago
he was the guy.
Yep.
Here we are, guys.
And then we were hanging out at the Reuters conference, and he was just like this smooth cat that everybody, there was this little circle of conversation going on, and you got Brian Kramer and a couple other people, and we're just chatting up EVs and remarketing.
Yeah, we found our people quickly.
It was so good. Yeah. So I've thoroughly enjoyed getting to know him at ASOTU just a little bit ago. And this guy, he's young guy, like ourselves,
Yeah, I'm not young anymore.
He's resolute, and he's just got a great way about him. So I can't wait to have this longer form conversation in a podcast. So if you're here with us, we hope you enjoy the conversation today.
I always get angry when people don't talk about their history in the car business and they just go right into what they do in the industry. Not like you would do that, but I think
you won't anymore.
Not after I set it up like that.
I'm about to make you angry. Watch.
Check this. Check me out. So tell us about your first job in the auto industry.
Yeah. I think technically it wasn't really a job because it wasn't really employment, but
because I didn't actually get paid, and they did see me off the lot with police escort. But aside from that part.
Well, yeah, but who hasn't had that experience? It's so what was it, the year 2001, and I'm in high school, and I have recently moved out of my parents' house. I'm 16, and I'm picking up income streams here and there. I was a LAN partier though, so primarily the easiest way was to find small businesses that needed help keeping their computers running, and my first job in auto was keeping the computers running inside of this Volkswagen dealer, which is what led to Dennis Teach, the service manager at Armstrong Volkswagen during that time, and actually today too, asking if I wanted a real job. And the real job was to be a lot attendant working the service drive for a new swing shift operation he was spinning up, where a new team of technicians and service advisor would come in at 5 p.m. and they would work until the cars were done. And they were there on Saturdays too. So that was my indoctrination into helping to keep that machine running.
That's amazing.
Wait a second. So what year was this?
Yeah. Let me think about this. Maybe it was 2002, actually.
Because there's still people, this isn't totally about, but there's still people how do we do this whole two technician shift thing and then make sure that we're covering all the bases and stuff like that. And this cat's out here. You just so happen to be on the innovative front lines of a service bay. Mm-hmm. What was it like? Because there couldn't have been more than a handful of those people in the country doing it at that point. Talk us through what the actual rhythms of the night and the days were like.
One of the benefits or downfalls I had was having never worked in a shop before, so I just didn't know any better. I didn't know that we were doing something that was counterintuitive. And yeah, I mean, there were a lot of things about it that made it operationally difficult. And for example, all the bays were shared, right? Like if you had your own bay as a technician during the day, but then you would have to get that car out of there if you could, so that the technician that used the same bay at night could pull their car in.
Kind of like
And
Airbnb in your bay.
pretty much, yeah. Which sometimes that led to some really fast collaborations toward the end of that shift to get those things moved out of there, including people pushing them in and out, which was nobody's favorite part of the job. 2 toolboxes for every bay too, right? Everybody's got their own tools. And every now and then there would be some crossover, because not every vehicle can actually be pushed out of there or driven out of there elegantly. And that was just in the shop. Then in the service drive, you would have a bit of a changing of the guard. Several service advisors who worked there during the day, one who ran the whole operation at night, who I was reporting to for the first few months before I became that person. And yeah, there may be like an hour in between where everybody's there at the same time, and then day shift people would disperse, and then we would be there really until the work got done, or until we were too tired.
Wow. Not the answer
So
I was
cool.
fully expecting right there.
It's
And
so
you said
cool.
it's the same service manager there that was there when you started?
You know, he's had a few career stops amongst various groups around that metro area in Portland, Oregon, but today he's back. And there are actually a few members of the leadership team who are still there today, who were there when I worked there 20 years ago. And I think even like some frontline people too, technicians.
That's great.
I'm always fascinated by the potential far-reaching application or implication rather of you providing that service to a pocket community back in the day, way ahead of its time, and now 21 years later, 22 years later, there's this concept kind of popping up here and there, but there's already customers that are so indoctrinated, they're like, we've had this since the 2000s. Like, what are you talking about? What was the initial, if you can recall back, what was the initial, I guess, acceptance of this concept in that amidst your consumer base? Did they get it right away? Was there hesitancy? Like, how did you deepen the indoctrination for something that at that time was ahead of its time?
It was mixed for sure. There's a certain crowd that absolutely loved it, right? Because it worked better with their schedule. Like, it can be a little bit frustrating to have to organize your life around the business hours of a business that operates at the same time when you're trying to do your job. And at baseline, most people aren't bringing their vehicle into a service department because some sort of celebratory event, right? So if you can make that in any way more convenient.
The way you said that is just so
It
perfect.
took a minute for that one to land for me.
Sorry.
Typically not. Yay.
That's great.
Oh,
Jimmy, I'm
man,
so
man.
glad to see you again. Just kidding. I got that one a lot.
Yeah, no, yeah, just kidding.
Yeah. So that was what was great about it. And then there would be, you know, the concept of maybe your vehicle was worked on during the day, but now you have until 9 or 10 p.m. to pick it up. And we also had a shuttle driver working into the evening too. So people really liked that. Where it would get really frustrating and counterintuitive is maybe you brought your vehicle in at night and maybe it wasn't finished. And when you called in the next day, the technician that worked on it is not there. And I am not there, right? And we did what we could to sort of like work around that and be mindful of situations that are maybe more time sensitive, for example. But that was something that during my time, we never really fully like ironed the kinks out of. The other piece was parts availability. It was perfect if you had everything on hand in your own inventory, but it's difficult to do parts runs amongst like the network of surrounding dealers if they're not open at the same time as you.
Mm-hmm.
So those were some of the interesting nuances of being a bit of a trailblazer, if you will, at that moment in time.
But did you yell at your customers? Because every time I go into a service department, there is that service advice. Be right with you, sir. You're like, well, hey, I'm the only person here. What are you doing?
Cirillo, this is in your therapy session, bro. This is in your therapy session.
Yeah, you know, I'm not much of a yeller, but you know how I said that the person I reported to him for a few months. the customer satisfaction surveys rolled in, and suddenly my career trajectory there escalated a lot faster than I had planned, and I became the service advisor within that operation. I think about 90 days into my run there, and that was a crash course on the industry, to say the least.
All right, so we've crushed like the first 90 days.
I think he's got credibility.
He's got some credibility.
We've established credibility. He's a car person.
He's a car dude. So okay, give us like the next what is it, like 21 years? Try and give us that in like the next 90 seconds, because I want to get to the past 6 months pretty quickly. Super important. So like condense it as fast as you possibly can.
That's okay. This is my specialty. Yeah. So like so many
Put
people
that on the teleprompter.
Exactly. Yeah. Like so many people that I had worked with, like in the context of a dealership, like this is a job that had career trajectory. You can make real money. You can pick up very valuable skills that are applicable everywhere, and you get thrown into the fire like very fast, and things escalate. You end up doing a lot of jobs if you work hard and if you enjoy yourself. So that was my ticket to paying for school. I was working a swing shift, so I would go to college during the day. Then I would show up at work at night, and I did that for a good few years. And 20 years ago, you could do that on a service advisor salary and not take on student loans. On the tail end of it, I was extended the opportunity to try out internet sales, which was a nascent idea at the time. Like there's a whole separate silo. I mean, I was the silo, but it's like, oh, this is a customer that came in from the internet, therefore it will go to the internet person. And I think they gave me a little too much credit. Like my conversion rate on people coming in was extremely high, like well north of 50%. But also these were like high intended people who came inbound, like knew what they wanted when they were coming in. And that was a whole different stack of experiences that I thoroughly enjoyed. I wasn't always the most popular person because customers would like walk in and they would walk right past the showroom directly to an office. But I'm sure that process is much more ironed out now, 20 years later. Maybe. So I graduate in management information systems, going back to the roots of having fixed computers to get into that door. And I grew up in an entrepreneurial household, and I was super interested in working at a technology startup. So I joined a software company located in downtown Portland as a salesperson, and spent 8 years there and did just about every non-technical job you can as it grew from 30 people to nearly 1,000 people. And when it got so big that it felt more like a growth stage than an early stage, I kind of got the itch to try something earlier again. And I had one career stop in a really early stage fintech company that ended up being acquired in under a year, which was super interesting in many different ways and a lot of fun. But that's when I found Tesla thereafter. And that to me felt like an opportunity to throw my ego out the door and just join in whatever capacity I could, because the product seemed really interesting to me. The mission was super important to me. And I thought I had a lot to learn from people who were operating at a scale that I never had access to. So that's what kicked off the 5-year run.
What part of the mission? I think it's easy to forget what Tesla's mission was early on, because now it's, who knows?
Yeah, I know.
It's still very similar. I think that's the thing, like it's
go ahead. It
takes on a persona.
It's just buried.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so the mission is to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. And initially that was done more explicitly through road transportation, but now, as we all know, it's a business of many businesses therein around sustainability, both in the context of transportation, but then energy more broadly. But in 2018, the focal point of that mission was Model 3 production ramp. So that was our focus at that time. And I joined on the finance team, but when you're in a stage of a company's life like that one, everything is everybody's job. So I had the opportunity to
say that again.
When you're at that stage of company, like everything is your job, no matter who you are. Like
I think that we should just put that on the ASOTU job application.
Even when
everything is your job all the time.
Gazillions in funding.
That makes me feel so good.
Yeah,
it does. It's like, okay.
And they had a lot of money.
Well, I mean, you could read about what the financial outlook was in 2018, and it was the most shorted company in the world. But yeah, I got to be on a finance team. I got to build cars. I got to talk to suppliers and help make decisions that manifested themselves physically on the exterior of the cars that I can look at today and say, yeah, I know why that happened, or I helped make that happen. And that was a transformational experience, to say the least. And that was before I found the used car team, which was ultimately my home there for a good several years.
We were going.
And to which David Long rejoiced. He was like, yes, he found used cars. Congratulations. Right.
One of us. One of us.
I know. I love it. Like and this is, I think this is probably true. I'm leaning on your Tesla side of stuff, right? Like people just look at Tesla and they're like, big conglomerate EV company. And it's like, no, you were a part of the used car team, of which like was selling and repositioning and moving around vehicles and remarketing them and getting them into customers' driveways. And you have a deep history in auto. And I'm guessing you probably weren't the only one that had like a deep, intimate knowledge of the real retail auto industry in those teams, right?
Oh, for sure. I think the most relatable thing about me when I joined that team was that I liked to call myself a 30 under 30, not because Forbes had ever heard of me, but because that's how many cars I had owned before I turned 30 years old, which is probably the sign of a diagnosable problem. But I was in very good company, and there were plenty on that team that could have absolutely like roasted that number by comparison. And
I got to get working on, I think my only chance now is 50 under 50.
Hey man,
I got 6 years to acquire a lot of cars.
That's great. Let's do it together. I'm just working hard over here so I can have a house with a garage, let alone like cars to put inside.
You're living that LA life for one day.
One day. But yeah, Kyle, no, it's true. A lot of very experienced automotive operators on that team, far more than me.
So, and I don't want to miss out because we don't have a ton of time left, but when you were at a company like that and then seeing the industry headed toward a clear path toward EVs, that it's coming, right? We were actually, Paul and I were talking about this morning, just automotive news alone, talking about the new entrants into the market.
Yeah.
Actually, the EV stack is higher than the ICE stack on what's coming in the next 2 years. So it's just clear, like all the OEMs, it's coming. It's just how we handle it as a market and as a culture. And you're seeing that and you're going, there's gaps here. I need to fill a gap. Talk about how the gap that you're filling now with Plug, that will give you a chance to plug in just a second. But talk about how the lead up to seeing this particular gap happened.
Yeah, absolutely. We were keeping an eye on the market very broadly outside of the context of our own walls. And it was both in terms of how our own vehicles were being sold to retail customers in their second life, but then other EVs that were on the road. And the way that we wanted to see those assets being marketed was just fundamentally different than what's true for normal cars, because EVs are fundamentally different. And I don't want to fall into my typical talk track, but if you think about all of the EVs that are coming to the market and one's ability to be a subject matter expert on them, you're really asking people to be subject matter experts on computers that are on wheels. And just imagine, as a salesperson, trying to have enough firsthand experience with every Android phone that's ever been made and be able to speak about them confidently. Really, it's impossible without having information at your fingertips, but it's not enough to have information about them from when they were brand new several years ago, because things change, right? Like what software is installed, which processor does this thing have? How much memory does it have? Let alone battery, which is the focal point of many conversations. And yeah, we saw this playing out firsthand very, very slowly, right? Because even to this day, it's barely 1% of the used car market. But what really took me back and gave me enough conviction to take the jump and build this business was just how fast the growth curve is going to hit us. And it's a 45x growth in under a decade. It's huge.
Whew. Couple things.
Yeah. When I think about this knowledge necessary to sell, I think, okay. And I love that you pinned it against like the Android phone, right? Because, if we can do some like slight apples and oranges competitive comparison between phones and cars, we're like Tesla, Apple, right? And then Android phones, kind of legacy automakers, that's shaping up in that general direction. There's a large ownership
Totally.
of market share, clear lines, like simple structure of options, right? You've got 4 or 5 options that are totally available with not a lot of package differences. That's very similar to the app. But like when you look over at Android, it's just like this hodgepodge of billions of different options and phones and different stuff like that. But
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't even, the phone comparison actually pales in comparison to how many options automakers create in their, like, not just body styles and interior features, but now the types of computers and the type of software that might be available, and then the software upgrades. I never even thought like that deeply about it's not just the single computer technology or like, like self-driving, like what is that technology? It's the deep level knowledge of what's actually in the guts of that computer on wheels that is going to be so hard for, like, forget about a salesperson that's dedicating their entire life, but just the technology
buyer.
for the buyer to be able to see what they're buying, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the most popular proof of concepts that we came up with, and we were socializing amongst dealers in our customer discovery, was what we called the plug guide. And it's designed to be printed out. It's a piece of paper, and it's a customer facing summary of the information that we're able to pull together from any specific vehicle, right? Like, what do we know about its hardware? What do we know about its options and its configuration? What do we know about its software? What do we know about its battery? But it's not enough to just throw all that data at somebody. Like, present it in such a way so that it's like easy to navigate through the context of a sales conversation for both sides.
I mean, asking for a friend.
Your friends are my
Some
friends.
guy.
Say I know someone who's a close relative that may or may not sleep in the same bed as me. And
Like
she
most
owns
close
an
relatives.
EV. And battery comes up once a week.
Wow.
When should they consider not owning that vehicle anymore? Like, what is?
Oh, you mean like battery comes up once a week? Like, I'm gonna get
out of
stranded.
battery.
Yeah. Like, when does that sucker? Like, because from a wholesaling perspective.
And we're back to our therapy session with
Michael Cirillo.
I said a close friend. I don't. It's not for me.
Well, your wife's gonna have questions because as you've
Close relative.
Yeah. Even more questions.
Okay. Cat's out of the bag. She doesn't bring up the battery every week. I do. It's not in my car. So but is there a time limit? Like when you look at that, because you brought up battery a couple of times, hardware, this and that. But that seems to be the common thing that the market understands is, like after, everybody has their own number. They're like, after 8 years, that battery is going to cost more to replace than the car itself. Like, is that an actual thing?
Not really. I mean, here's the truth. Like, we don't know how long these vehicles will be able to survive on their initial powertrain end to end. But the data suggests that fears of high voltage battery pack failure are largely overblown. The only sizable data set that's ever been shared so far was shared by Tesla in their environmental report. It's published publicly. You can Google it and look it up. And what they showed was the broader Model S X fleet battery retention as they started crossing 200,000 miles. And the data showed that on an average running basis, the capacity retention is looking like, I believe it was 88%. So you're talking about 200K miles, and the car is practically the same car, honestly.
It's almost 1 million Canadian kilometers.
Right.
How about, have you heard? So I was thinking about this as after seeing your presentation at ASOTUCon, and I was like, well, what are the other fail points, right? Like how do the motors do? on the wheels? How do the electric
Yeah,
motors fare?
it's a great question. Not a lot of data on that in aggregate, but in general, you're talking about a very small number of moving parts, and you're talking about an electric motor. It's a fairly stable piece of hardware, and also like a relatively innocuous replacement cost if there is a failure
That's
mode.
exactly
Certainly,
it, right? It's not an engine, it's not a transmission, right? It's a motor, which is right there by the wheel. Right?
yeah. I mean, did you ever play with like RC cars when you were a kid?
Oh,
Did you
yeah.
ever like put these
Yeah.
things together and have
Yes.
like a little electric motor?
Yeah,
where you
right.
connect
The
positive
little
and
motor
negative?
in the
I mean,
back, and pop the wheel in there, and off you go.
yeah, I mean, it's kind of like that, only a lot bigger and a lot more powerful. And
Heavy,
one
yeah.
of my cars has 3 of them. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Wow. Well, hey, before we get off, I want to give you a chance, just real quick, if people are listening to this, to just share like the couple one-liners about exactly what Plug is doing, because I do think it is solving a problem for our industry that maybe a lot of people didn't even realize could be solved in the unique way that you've figured out how to do it.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Kyle. But before I do that, I just want to say anybody who's thinking about attending ASOTU next year needs to come.
Hey,
that was a game changer for me and for us. So thank you for hosting such a wonderful event and enabling me to meet what I believe will be some lifelong friends.
I love that.
So Plug is addressing the gap in the market right now where used electric vehicles are being transacted in a wholesale context with incomplete information. So what we've built is a online marketplace that facilitates wholesale buying and selling of used electric vehicles amongst a network of dealers and fleet operators, where there's 3 like core premises of differentiation here. And the first one is that we believe that information needs to be collected from every single vehicle before it's proposed for sale. The second is that we have seen in the market that about a third of used EV retail transactions are compressed into a very small population of dealers across the country. So we're curating that population to serve up critical mass to anybody that is selling, so that they are selling to a pool of very high intention and very highly informed buyers who can act quickly because they have access to that information. And the third is that EVs are different, and leveraging the differences in terms of velocity, maximizing transactions. So if you're selling a computer on wheels, one of the most important things to do is to sell it fast, because computers are more vulnerable to volatility in pricing because of where we are in the innovation curve right now. New technology comes out all the time. So optimizing everything about selling dealers' ability to move a car very quickly, which means that we do everything remotely. We do everything online. There's no physical brick and mortar location, nor are there any humans involved in the inspection or evaluation process. Technology enables the whole thing. So the optimization point is velocity.
Wow. That's awesome. Well, Jimmy, thanks for sharing that with us. Thanks for going a little bit on a history tour, all the way back to your days as a lot attendant. That was a super fun tour, and congratulations on everything that you're building. Can't wait to see the success. And thanks for joining us here on Auto Collabs.
Appreciate you guys, and feelings mutual across the board.
Hey, I didn't see the first 15 minutes of that conversation. It takes a lot to get us to go past 18 minutes on this show.
Yeah. We were, the minute he said, yeah. I was a part of like one of these overnight service things.
Swing shift service department back in 2002.
And now we've got our whole podcast ahead of us.
21 years ago. Right? Everybody's still wondering how to get it done.
I told you guys, I'm a ferocious note taker, and my note from today was, I wish I was smart.
Well, it's cool, because when you look back and you think about, and this service manager is now back with that same group, and you look back, and this is, I think, key with anybody that has some level of success in any industry they're in. You can normally point to some person that was their leader that gave them access to insights or knowledge or information or new or innovative thought that just broaden their horizon to say, oh, now I see the world differently, right? Jimmy's a guy that now I don't know what his history was before that, but there's probably something about that just allowed him to see the world differently. And that progresses through. Like, I can say that Aaron Hill, right? That I worked with back in the day at Sandy Sansing Nissan. Just open, not that I wasn't an innovative entrepreneurial, like forward thinking type personality, but he allowed me to see the world in a different way. And I think that's true of Jimmy, obviously.
Well, it's clear that he made the choice, regardless of where he was at in his career, his environment that he was in, he made the choice to use that and be inspired by it. And that's,
Yep.
I'm inspired by that thought process. I mean, even, listening to Jesse Cole as the keynote, these are people that have not created anything net new, but have innovated using or leveraging tools and resources at their disposal. And it's because they're making a choice to be inspired by their environment, their circumstances, or whatever. And I just love that. That was a reminder listening to Jimmy today that each of us, it's available to each of us. We can make a choice to be inspired and then innovate.
Ooh, got me.
There it is.
I actually have a T-shirt that says "Innovation is a choice" on it. I'm going to get you guys
Oh,
one.
really? Oh,
I need one.
I'm going to get you guys one of them. Well, regardless, we're glad you hung around with us for this kind of extended edition of Auto Collabs because it was great. On behalf of Kyle Mountseer, Michael Cirillo, and myself, thanks for being with us today on Auto Collabs.
Welcome to Auto Collabs. Why are we recording?
Are we rolling yet?